Hello everybody, welcome back to IndyCar. It is an evening special this evening. Sorry I haven't had a chance to speak to you during the day. Just the pressure of work means I tend to do my Wednesday show in the evenings. Anyway, it's the 8th of May today. Sorry, 8th of May. And well, there's a number of interesting stories in the press this week and today in particular, but one very interesting that caught my eye this morning was sent to me by a friend, and it was a short clip of an interview conducted between Mark Zuckerberg and Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage was asking Zuckerberg in what looked like a committee room about how Facebook was changing the way in which the political discourse in the United Kingdom was being conducted on social media. Now, you've heard me complaining a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other people on Facebook who do a little bit of political blogging or video blogging like I do, complaining about suddenly dropping numbers of people viewing some of these videos. And also a steep drop-off in the numbers of people who are reading our own posts. Now, we're not the only people that this is happening to. It sometimes feels like the independence movement is the only political movement in the UK which is being targeted for this particular type of treatment. But actually, what this video revealed with Nigel Farage and Mark Zuckerberg was that we're not the only ones being targeted by this. In fact, according to Nigel Farage, he thinks that anyone with a right of centre viewpoint in the political spectrum in the United Kingdom is having the number of views of their material deliberately cut by the new so-called algorithms. These are the electronic or robotic systems within Facebook which monitor the way people are using the platform and what they can see, what they can't see, what they can comment on and what they can't comment on. Nigel Farage claims that in the last year, visitors or views of his material had dropped off by about 25%. Now, actually, for once in my life, I find myself actually agreeing with Nigel Farage about something. And he's right. I would say at least 25% of the views on my own show have dropped down. And I think, I might be wrong in this, but I remember when they first brought out these new so-called algorithms, these new methods of calculating the number of views, that I lost 40% of my views overnight because they changed the rules on how they count views. And then since then, and particularly since the independence referendum was announced by Nicola Sturgeon, I've seen a steady drop in the numbers of people apparently viewing and interacting with the video or the video shows. So what is actually going on? Well, according to Zuckerberg, he was tasked with trying to make this a more level playing field for people. In other words, he's trying to prevent big political organisations or entire governments from buying huge chunks of attention on his social media platform. So what these new algorithms are looking for is patterns of behaviour where large numbers of people are watching videos from one source, one particular source, doesn't matter what the source is. And the algorithms then take over and limit how many views, how many times somebody can view something, what they can interact with, and how many comments they can make about it. It also, I've noticed myself, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you say that you are a Scottish independence supporter, then when you look at your Facebook feed, you'll see lots of suggested posts or feeds or video blogs that you might want to see, and nearly all of them will be anti-independence. In fact, almost every one of them will be something like Scotland and Union or the Conservative Party or the Labour Party or something like that. It's as if when you say you have a political opinion, they immediately bombard you with lots of other political opinions. So this is obviously how the social media platform has been altered to damp down the social discourse that's going on at the moment. Now, whether it's intentional or not, the effect that it's having is to put people off using social media to find out news of a political nature, because they're not able to interact with the people that they trust, because the Facebook system is preventing them from getting the notifications that they normally have for their favourite blogs and video blogs and so on. So is it actually helping anybody at all? Because the way it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if Zuckerberg's algorithms on Facebook are stamping out political discourse on social media and then switching that out by bombarding people who have a particular, shall we say, a political viewpoint, bombarding them with opposing viewpoints, is a form of kind of political engineering, which I don't like the look of. It doesn't make it a level playing field. What it makes it is a very controlled environment where you are steered around and where you are cajoled and nudged in different directions by faceless robots within the system. And what it means for me is that fewer and fewer of my regular viewers can see these videos unless they specifically hunt for them. Sometimes it takes them 2 or 3 tries to finally get onto watching the live feed, and sometimes I just have to wait until the show is over and watch the recording. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that fewer people are actually watching live. At the moment, I'm watching the count just now, and there's about 148 of you watching live just now. During a particularly good rant, shall we say, which is on something which people feel strongly about, that figure will go up as high as about 225 on a good day, which is equal to, or roughly equal to, approximately what Nicola Sturgeon would get when she's giving a speech. Now, if I manage to reach that 225, I'm always really chuffed, because it means that I've touched a nerve, I've tapped into something important that people feel is important to talk about. But I think that Facebook is being engineered to deliberately shut politics out of it. It's dumbing the system down, and it's basically saying this is a social media platform. You're not here to pontificate about politics. You're not allowed to do that. We're going to discourage this at all costs, and we're going to bombard you with all kinds of suggestions for things that you actually don't want to see, but we think you might like to see. So I'm talking about, the idea of you want to talk politics, and Facebook is saying, oh, look, a fluffy kitten over here. Look, a squirrel. Look, there's a man falling off his bicycle into a ditch. This is the kind of inane and dumbed down sort of fluff that we're going to be bombarded with. Zuckerberg seems to have taken it upon himself to take all of the important and vital things that Facebook does and throw them in the bin and just make it about people's dinners, what they watched at the cinema, their friends falling over drunk at weddings. Now that's fine. That is what social media is about. It's a social thing. But not everybody wants to use it that way. So why are people with political opinions being discriminated against? Is that fair? I don't think so, especially when the mainstream media has such enormous power over the opinions and the views of other people by filtering the media out, filtering the news that you get, so that you only get what the establishment media wants you to see, steering you towards the typical black and white, yes and no, polarised Tory versus Labour or Republican versus Democrat, the binary system that the entire establishment is based upon, forced on you through television. The one great thing about social media that it always had going for it was we had everybody's views. Everybody could pile in, and it didn't matter who it was or what they did, they could all participate. Now, what's happening is they're deliberately trying to dismantle that. They're trying to force us apart. They're trying to prevent us from linking up and seeing what we want to see and saying what we want to say to as many people as possible. It's almost as if they want to shut it down and turn Facebook into MeWe, which is an alternative form of social media which only allows you to broadcast to people you already know, who are already friends with you. But the beauty of Facebook was the fact that you could cast a wider net, that you could spread out your message onto a social platform which was wide open to the public. Anybody could watch it. It didn't have to just go to your friends. So now Zuckerberg is reeling it back in. He's basically trying to stuff the genie back in the bottle. He's trying to constrain it back down to the kind of fluff and meaningless everyday trivia that some social media is just full of, which is fine for people who just want to be entertained in the mindless, tedious way. But some of us want to say more, shall we say, important messages and want to talk about things which are really of concern to everybody. And I think it's a sad day when what used to be the major antidote to the mainstream media is now gradually closing itself down and closing itself to that kind of political discourse. I don't particularly agree with Nigel Farage or anybody else on the right wing, but I would definitely agree with Nigel that he has a right to say what he wants to say, and his supporters have a right to hear it without being shut down and told that they should really be watching something about fluffy bunnies or, you know, alpaca wool making in the Pyrenees or something like that. This is not what the social medium is about. And I think Zuckerberg is on a hiding to nothing at the moment. He really needs to grow a backbone and say to the powers that be and to say to the vested interests of the existing mainstream media, no, I'm not going to play your games. You are the guys who censor what people see. Social media is the antidote. It's the freedom. It's the information superhighway. It should not be restricted. Freedom of speech is the fundamental tenet of all democratic places, all democratic countries, based on freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of association, freedom to organise and meet together, freedom to march together and to demonstrate together. Without these freedoms, we're not really free. We're actually just being manipulated. And I'm deeply disappointed in Facebook for taking this rather draconian methodology for trying to prevent big interests from interfering in political discourse. Instead of shutting out the political parties and shutting out people who want to conduct political discourse online, they should be encouraging it. We know that the so-called Russian interference in the Trump election was minimal. It was actually barely perceptible. It had almost no effect at all. In fact, it was Trump himself and his own PR men that brilliantly manipulated social media to win him that. And it was a popular vote by people on social media who didn't trust the mainstream media. Now, Donald Trump, whether you hate him or love him, he expertly used social media to win his premiership. I don't happen to like the man. I disagree with him at just about every single level that there is to disagree. But you've got to hand it to him. He won that battle on social media, fair and square, in exactly the same way that the UK would use the television media to help the Tories win a general election. It's just another medium. It's another channel to get information to people. Anyway, that's about all I want to say on that subject for the moment, but you will find that all of you who are operating on Facebook for political campaigning will feel the same restrictions. You'll not be able to see the same things. You will have to work a lot harder to stay in touch, and you have to keep posting to different people all the time so that you show not just a pattern of behaviour in one group, but links to lots of other people, so that Facebook keeps having to chase around after you to try to figure out what you're going to do next. If we act in a more unpredictable way, then these web bots have a harder job predicting what we're going to do next. But we just have to work with what we've got. In the meantime, we have to carry on as usual, but don't expect it to be easy to find the people on Facebook that you want to hear, because it's not going to be easy. And as I say, I agree with Nigel Farage on this, that Zuckerberg and his new algorithms have basically made it extremely difficult for any party other than the Tories and the Labour Party to get any kind of toehold with people, to connect with people, and it's not fair. It is moving the goalposts. It's not creating a level playing field. It's bulldozing an entire playing field off a cliff so that the existing television media has full sway. And how they've done it, I don't know, but they've put pressure on Zuckerberg, trying to basically shut him down and get him to worry about inappropriate material being shared online. There will always be people who try to share inappropriate material on the internet, not just on Facebook, and will always be chasing around trying to shut them down. But it doesn't mean they should be shutting down political discourse. That is censorship. That is basically closing down a line of communication amongst people that you just don't like the views of, and that is not fair. So, on behalf of myself and Nigel Farage, I'd just like to say that, Nigel, I agree with you on this one point. If nothing else, we're agreed on this, that smaller parties are disproportionately disadvantaged by Facebook doing this. Anyway, end of rant on that. The next topic for conversation tonight is another good news story from Scotland. It was announced today by the Scottish Government that they are planning to introduce a bottle deposit scheme. Now, those old fogies like myself who are in their 50s will remember in your childhood that if you bought a bottle of Iron Brew or a bottle of anything virtually, Dandelion and Burdock, for those of you who can remember that far back, Vimto, whatever it was, in a glass bottle, then that bottle had a deposit on it, and that meant that when you'd finished drinking the stuff out of the bottle, you would take it back to the shop where you bought it, and they would give you some money for it. Now, at one point it would, years ago, it was sixpence, then it was a shilling, and then after we all decimalised, it was 10p, and then it was 20 pence. And the idea was that this would encourage people, having had the enjoyment of drinking the drink, to return the bottle to the shop, where they would then return it to the manufacturer, who would wash the bottle out, relabel it, and fill it up to be used again, in much the same way we used to do with milk bottles. And of course, the great thing about this is it means there is no refuse. There's no waste from this whole system. So now the Scottish Government has introduced this, not just for glass bottles, but for plastic fizzy drinks bottles of the PET variety. Now, the PET is a polyester tetraphene, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on the chemicals there, but something like that. Is a very strong and indestructible plastic. And as you know, it gets everywhere. It's in all the bushes, it's at the sides of the road, it's in rivers, canals, it's in the sea, it's everywhere we don't want it to be. And by just simply saying that every single bottle of pop that's sold in Scotland has to have a 20 pence deposit on it, and in order to get the 20 pence back, you have to return the bottle to the shop where you bought it, or any retailer that is part of the scheme. And they will give you your 20 pence back, or give you 20 pence credit to spend in the shop, whatever you wish. It's a terrific system. It's been known to work for decades before it was scrapped. There was no reason for it to be scrapped in the first place. But when plastic bottles came out, they very quickly overtook the glass bottle, because they were a bit lighter and you could probably ship them a bit cheaper because they were a bit lighter. They also obviously didn't smash like a glass bottle would do if you dropped it. But on the downside, they were entirely dispensable. So when you were finished with them, they were just tossed aside. And the problem is, there are billions of them all over the planet. So this is a very good move on the part of the Scottish Government, not to penalise the drinks packaging industry unduly, but to encourage them to make their bottles, maybe actually make their bottles a bit thicker and stronger so they can be recycled more times. I'm not sure how they are going to recycle the bottles, whether they're going to rip them all up, melt them down and make new bottles, or whether they can simply, if they're in good condition, wash them out and refill them and use them again. But I'm sure there's something in mind for doing that. Part of the scheme is that you can do this for glass bottles, PET bottles, or cans. So that's drinks cans, like Iron Brew cans as well. There'll be a deposit on all of those. The only containers, as far as I know, which will not get a deposit on them are things like milk cartons, milk bottles, because they're made out of a polyethylene material, which, although it's recycled, they haven't at the moment figured out how to do a bottle deposit scheme on that. It might come later. But it's a very good idea. And when I was a kid, one of the only ways we could make money during the summer months, because I lived near the seaside, was to go along the beaches and actually pick up lots and lots of ginger bottles. And we would take them all back to the shop. Sometimes we'd even wash them out ourselves so they were all nice and clean. Take them back to the shop. And that was how we bought our sweeties when we were kids, if we didn't have enough pocket money. Or we could save the money up and buy something we wanted with it later on. The nice thing about it was the bottles get recycled, we were slightly richer, and everybody was happy. And so it's a win-win for everyone. Everybody wins with this recycling system. The bottle manufacturers don't go out of business. They keep the lighter bottles in circulation, so we don't have so many glass bottles breaking. But all of it, including glass cans and plastic bottles, will have a deposit return. And that means everybody will pay that 20 pence extra on their drink, but they'll get it back as long as they bring back the empty. So it's a simple, effective and proven system. It's nice to see it back, and I think there's going to be, as far as I understand it, a year-long sort of introduction period for this, where they'll pilot it in a few areas just to check that it's working. They obviously have to make sure that they have sufficient recycling people. In other words, companies prepared to recycle the bottles, either the companies that produce them or the drinks manufacturers that make them. There is some talk of having a thing called a reverse vending machine, which instead of selling you a bottle of cola, will accept the empty bottle that you put in it, scan its barcode, and if the barcode it means it's part of the scheme, then it gives you 20 pence, and that will be presumably carried by some mechanism into a skip around the back. And that's a nice simple way of doing it as well. If you don't have a shop, those kinds of machines could be put at amenity dumps, so people could bring their empties and just fire them all in and get the change out. Anyway, it's a good thing. I'm glad to see it happening. The last story tonight is a sort of two-parter. In the usual way that these things are done, the BBC has been trumpeting the fact that the United Kingdom has had its first ever year where it has produced all of its electricity without using coal for the first time ever. So this is being trumpeted as a big occasion, one massive fanfare, how wonderful the UK is. And it is wonderful, but we have to remember that most of that energy that was replacing the coal-powered generation came from us, came from Scotland. We have the largest tidal stream energy capacity of any country on the planet at the moment. We make more power from the tide, from the sea, than anybody else in the world just now. Not to mention our offshore wind farms and our onshore wind farms. So we are making, at the moment, if I remember this correctly, we are responsible for 41% of the entire UK's renewable energy. So we're talking about England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. We produce 40% of the power for all of that. And we are only 8% of the population. So as usual, we're not just punching it above our weight, we're actually punching much higher than that even. We are knocking them flat, you know, we are knocking them out of the ring at the moment when it comes to energy. And this falls into line a little bit with what we were saying the other day about why Scotland needs to catch this energy bus just now while we have the chance to do it. As I mentioned yesterday, the European Union is investing 5 billion euros in France, and I think it's 6 billion in Germany, in creating 2 new car battery plants. This is for electric car batteries, to catch up with China, which is miles ahead of everybody in terms of electric car battery manufacture. And I was saying that I felt that Scotland has lagged behind a little bit in this regard in storing energy. And since we produce so much of it, I had suggested that we did a deal with Germany for them to give us some of their new electric trains. In exchange, we can give them some of our surplus energy for free, do a trade. And I think this is the kind of cooperative scheme in Europe that really we have to be involved in, and is one of the major reasons why I still think that Scotland has to remain in Europe or connected to it as closely as possible in trading terms, because there are massive opportunities for us to gain from this. Being the biggest producer of tidal energy on the planet at the moment is one thing, but we are only scraping the surface at the moment in terms of the energy available. It's worth remembering that a tide turbine will produce, for the same size of propeller, if you like, 800 times the energy density of a wind turbine, because water is 816 times denser. And that means more power from slow-moving flows of water than you get from the wind. And not only that, but the tide runs 4 times a day. In and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And it does that on a regular basis, every day of the week, every week of the year, rain or shine, day and night, because it's to do with the orbit of the moon. Nothing to do with the weather, nothing to do with the sunlight. So tidal energy is the answer in terms of filling the gap that coal and nuclear will leave in the future, because tidal energy is entirely dependable and massively powerful. We just need to find ways of storing it. And as I said yesterday, Scotland is leading the way with converting that energy into hydrogen. Hydrogen gas can either be used for heating, it can also be used to propel a car with a conventional petrol engine, it can be used through a thing called a fuel cell, which takes the hydrogen and recombines it with oxygen to produce electricity instead of a battery. So if Scotland has its head screwed on the right way, then it's time for us to ramp up energy storage by manufacturing more hydrogen. And if we want to store it for longer periods of time, use the hydrogen to make ammonia, which has a lot of hydrogen in it. And ammonia is a liquid that you could store indefinitely at room temperature, which means that you can convert it back to hydrogen at any time later on. All of these things are being worked on in Scotland at the moment. And let's not forget that whenever the UK says that it's hitting its climate targets and it's making its electricity from green energy, just remember where most of the green energy is coming from. Because in the future, and it's not long in the future, when the tidal energy capacity of Scotland is fully exploited, we'll be manufacturing enough energy, not just for Scotland, but probably for 5 or 6 countries. Maybe even more, depending on how well connected we are. Anyway, I want to leave it on that happy note today. It's also worth noting, for the record, that the new baby that Harry and Meghan have had is to be called Archibald. Not my first choice of names, I'd have to say. Somebody had suggested Harrison, which I thought actually was a decent name. But as far as I understand it, and maybe somebody will correct me later on, his official title, this baby, is to be the, what was it? He was to be the Duke of somewhere or other. Duke of Dumbarton, I think it was, or the Earl of Dumbarton, something like that. But I don't know. I don't know exactly. Who cares, really? Frankly, I don't care at all, actually. So, anyway, I shall see you all later, and I'll be back again on Scotland at 7 tomorrow night on Broadcasting Scotland. I don't know if I'm going to be interviewing somebody tomorrow night. I know that that Lewis was interviewing Green Party spokesperson last night, and it was a very good interview indeed. I'm hoping we might get perhaps another politician for interview tomorrow night, but we'll wait and see. Anyway, I'll see you all tomorrow night on Scotland at 7, on Broadcasting Scotland, 7 p.m. tomorrow night on YouTube. You can also catch up on it. You can watch it live streaming as well, but I usually will post a copy of it to my own feed on Facebook later on. Anyway, I'll see you all tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye for now.